Hi everyone, my name is Michelle and I'm going to be discussing exam question 15 that talks about the three features of information processing in neural networks. The first feature I want to talk about is the localist neural representation. These are units that are activated when the input has the feature encoded that the unit encodes. And so the individual units work as feature detectors. On the right, we have an image that visually represents what I mean by units. Units are simply vehicles of this particular representation, and each stimulus dimension, whether that's color, shape, and size, is represented by a specific pool of neurons, and then each specific value, red, green, and blue, is represented by a detector neuron, in which denotes that there's one neuron activated per possible value, such as the color red. This is actually pretty similar to symbolic representations because we're assigning symbolic labels to neurons as a physical symbol system would. And so the color yellow in this diagram just shows that these particular neurons are active. And so we can see that this representation is based on the distinct activation of specific neurons within a given pool that is associated with a particular feature. There's an extreme to this approach, which would be the grandmother cell. It is just a neuron that specifically is activated when you see your grandma and thus grants you the ability to recognize your grandmother. This is more of an obsolete observation, but it does give us the general idea of localist neural representations. The next feature I want to talk about is distributed neural representations. This is where each unit is represented as a pattern of activity over multiple neurons, and then each neuron participates in the representation of multiple items. And so these representations store information in its pattern of weights or connectivity. And in this particular pattern of connectivity in the network, it ultimately determines what output is produced in response to particular inputs. Any one neuron can respond to an entire range of stimuli, and thousands of neurons can respond to any given stimulus, which is actually shown by the image on the right. This network learns by adjusting its weight or its connections until it finds the most suitable or correct output. So the benefits of this type of representation is the fact that it contributes to learning by generalization to similar patterns, such that the neural network generalizes novel patterns that are similar to known input patterns. This allows for overlap, which thus contributes to learning. The third feature I want to talk about is the connectionist information processing. And neural networks are algorithmic in a limited sense for learning and updating activation levels on each cycle. And then this representation also elicits that once a network has been trained, all of its knowledge is located in the weight of its connections, such as the neuronal synapses. This is called superpositional storage, and then each stage of information processing involves input that is distributed to a weight matrix, which represents the relational connectivity among neurons, where we could call it parallel processing. This is just the stored or learned information in the weights that becomes distributed across the network itself. And this is actually more biologically plausible than the physical symbol system because these connectionist models are very successful in pattern recognition tasks, which may underlie learning via parallel processing. Thus, we can approach this question by simply understanding that the physical symbol system fails to acknowledge information processing as a function of life. And so it's not algorithmic in the sense because they're not fixed in the way they respond to input, and they do not operate over discrete representations. And so, as mentioned before, the physical symbol system, according to Newell and Simon, has a necessary and sufficient means for general intelligent action, which is the essential basic principle that governs cognition and artificial intelligence. In the physical symbol system, representations are distinct and identifiable components in a cognitive system. And in localist neural representations, we can see this feature somewhat take form of a physical symbol system as we apply labeling to certain neurons that code for certain features. However, this is not the case for coding of more complex stimuli, because many cognitive abilities such as context effects and perception, pattern completion, and language cannot be modeled in a strictly rule-based way because it would fail to capture the essence of abstract concepts, which cannot be modeled as simple vehicles in the physical symbol system. So the main takeaway is that the brain is much more complex than we think. It's difficult to quantify or model something that is constantly evolving. So this is just to amplify the idea that simulated systems of cognition and intelligence require far more exploration beyond the digitized realm, so to speak. And so in cognitive science, this remains as a field of questioning the nature of human cognition. So that's all I got for today. Thank you guys for listening.